Hey, bullfrogs. All right, so we are starting our new book. It's called Christmas in Camelot, book number 29. And we're going to, I guess, get into Christmas here in the middle of April, but that's okay. This will be fun. This will be different. All right, so chapter 1 is called A Royal Invitation. Here we go. Sunlight had faded from the late afternoon sky. Puffy snow clouds were moving in. "Let's hurry, I'm cold," said Jack. He and Annie were walking home from school. Their Christmas vacation was just beginning. "Coo, coo." "Wait," said Annie, "look." She pointed to a white bird sitting on a bare tree branch at the edge of the woods. The bird was staring straight at them. "It's a dove," said Jack. "It's a messenger," said Annie. "From Morgan." "No," Jack said, afraid to get his hopes up. They hadn't seen Morgan Le Fay in a long time. He really missed her. "Yes," said Annie. "She has a mission for us. I can feel it." In the hush of the cold twilight, the dove spread its wings and flew into the Frog Creek woods. "Come on," said Annie. "The treehouse is back." "You're just hoping," said Jack. "I'm knowing," said Annie. She ran into the woods, following the white dove. "Oh, brother," said Jack. But he took off after Annie. Even in the growing darkness, they easily found their way. They zigzagged between the bare trees and ran over the frozen ground until they came to the tallest oak in the woods. "See?" said Annie, pointing to the top of the tree. "Yeah," whispered Jack. There it was, the magic tree house. "Morgan!" shouted Annie. Jack held his breath, waiting to see the enchantress at the treehouse window. But Morgan did not appear. Annie grabbed the rope ladder and started up. Jack followed. When they climbed inside the treehouse, Jack saw something lying on the floor. It was a scroll, rolled up and tied with a red velvet ribbon. Jack picked up the scroll and unrolled it. The thick, yellowed paper shimmered with large gold writing. "Wow, Morgan sent us a really fancy note," said Annie. "It's an invitation," said Jack. "Listen." Here's a picture of what the invitation looks like. It says, "Dear Jack and Annie, please accept this royal invitation to spend Christmas in the kingdom of Camelot." And it's signed M, just a capital M. "Christmas in Camelot?" said Annie. "I don't believe it." "Cool," whispered Jack. He pictured a beautiful glowing castle lit with candles and filled with knights and ladies feasting and singing. "We're going to celebrate Christmas with Morgan and King Arthur," said Annie, "and Queen Guinevere." "Yeah," said Jack, "and the Knights of the Round Table like Sir Lancelot." "Let's go," said Annie. "Where's the book?" She and Jack looked around the treehouse for a book about Camelot. The only book they saw was the Pennsylvania book that always brought them home. "That's strange," said Jack. "Morgan didn't send a book about Camelot with a royal invitation. How does she expect us to get there?" "I don't know," said Annie. "Maybe she forgot." Jack picked up the invitation. He read it again. He turned it over, hoping to find more information. The back of the scroll was blank. He handed the invitation to Annie. "She must have forgotten," he said. "Darn," said Annie, staring at the gold writing. "I really wish we could go to Camelot." The tree branches rustled. The wind began to blow. "What's happening?" said Jack. "I don't know," said Annie. "Wait a minute," said Jack. "You were holding the invitation and you made a wish." The wind blew harder. "That must have made the magic work," cried Annie. Jack felt a surge of joy. "We're going to Camelot," he said. The treehouse started to spin. It spun faster and faster. Then everything was still. Absolutely still. Chapter 2. This is Camelot? With a question mark. Jack shivered. He could see his breath in the dim light. Annie was staring out the window. "This is Camelot?" she said. Jack looked out with her. The treehouse had landed in a grove of tall, bare trees. A huge, dark castle loomed against the gray sky. No light shone from its windows. No banners waved from its turrets. Wind whistled through its tall towers, sounding sad and lonely. It looks deserted, said Annie. Yeah, said Jack. I hope we came to the right place. Jack pulled his notebook and pencil out of his pack. He wanted to write a description of the dark castle. Hey, I see someone, said Annie. Jack looked out the window again. A woman was crossing the castle drawbridge. She wore a long cloak and carried a lantern. Her white hair blew in the wind. Who do you think it is? So here's a picture of them, where they landed, and there's the castle. And who do you think that is? You know probably who that is, don't you? Yeah. Morgan, said Annie and Jack together. They laughed with relief. Morgan hurried over the frost-covered ground toward the grove of trees. Annie, Jack, is that you? She called. Of course. Who'd you think? Shouted Annie. She started down from the treehouse. Jack threw his notebook into his backpack. He followed Annie down the rope ladder. When they reached the icy ground, they ran to Morgan and both threw their arms around her. I was looking out a window in the castle and saw a bright flash in the orchard, said Morgan. What are you doing here? Hang on, my phone is doing something. Okay. What are you doing here? You didn't send the treehouse for us? Asked Jack. With a royal invitation to spend Christmas in Camelot? Asked Annie. No, said Morgan. She sounded alarmed. But the invitation was signed with an M, said Jack. I don't understand, said Morgan. We are not celebrating Christmas in Camelot this year. You aren't, said Jack. Why not, said Annie. A look of sadness crossed Morgan's face. Do you remember when you visited my library and gave King Arthur the hope and courage to challenge his enemy? She asked. Sure, said Jack. Well, Arthur's enemy was a man named Mordred, that's what it is, said Morgan. After you left, Arthur defeated him, but not before Mordred's dark wizard cast a spell over the whole kingdom. The spell robbed Camelot of all its joy. What? All its joy? Whispered Annie. Yes, said Morgan. For months, Camelot has been without music, without celebration, and without laughter. Oh, no, said Annie. Well, what can we do to help, said Jack. Morgan smiled sadly. This time, I don't think you can do anything, she said, but perhaps it will lift Arthur's spirits to see you both again. Come, let's go inside the castle. Morgan held up her lantern and started down toward the drawbridge. Jack and Annie hurried after her. As they walked through the outer courtyard, the frozen grass cracked under their sneakers. They followed Morgan over the bridge and through a tall gate. There were no signs of life in the castle's inner courtyard. Where is everyone? Annie whispered to Jack. I don't know, he whispered back. Jack really wished they had a book about Camelot. It might help them understand what was going on. Morgan led them to a huge archway with 2 wooden doors. She stopped and looked at them. I'm afraid no book would help you tonight, Jack, she said. Jack was startled that Morgan had read his thoughts. Why not? Asked Annie. On all your other journeys, you visited real places and times in history, said Morgan. Camelot is different. How? Said Jack. The story of Camelot is a legend, said Morgan. A legend is a story that begins in truth, but then imagination takes over. Different people in different times tell the story. They use their imaginations to add new parts. That is how a legend is kept alive. Tonight, we'll add our part, said Annie. Yes, said Morgan. And please, I beg you in the lantern light. Oh, and please, I beg you. In the lantern light, she looked very serious. Do not let the story of Camelot end forever. Keep our kingdom alive. Of course we will, said Annie. Good, said Morgan. Come then, let us go into the great hall and see the king. Morgan lifted an iron latch and pushed open the heavy doors. Jack and Annie followed her into the dark castle. All right, so here's a picture of the castle doors. Huge, big castle doors. All right, so tomorrow we will pick up and we will read chapter 3, The Knights of the Round Table. See you then. Thank y'all for reading with me. Bye.